Bad Ideas, the show where we look at misfires, mistakes, and miscalculations from all throughout history.
I'm Tony Southcott.
And I'm Albert Berg, and Tony has a tale of woe for us about an ill-fated music festival called Fyre Festival. Tony, what do you got?
This is actually going to be one of the more recent ideas that we've had on the show. A lot of times we start dabbling in the 1800s and all this. But today we're actually talking about something that happened last year and is actually getting resolved in the past couple weeks. We are talking about the Fyre Festival.
And before we go further, we need to mention, it's fire with a Y, Tony.
Yes, fire with a Y, because
so
it's trendy.
You know they're serious.
Yeah. Marketing to those millennials and all.
Those millennials don't like... don't like vowels. I'm sorry. I forgot what a vowel was.
So imagine 2 weeks in the Bahamas, all food and drinks covered by the cost of admission, and all your time spent in luxury bungalows as some of the biggest names in music played on stages just a short walk down the beach.
That sounds
This
terrible.
Is the Fyre Festival.
I don't drink and I don't like popular music.
It's an experience more than it is a music festival. According to its promo, it said it was so powerful that it bordered on the impossible.
It turned out to be impossible, huh?
Yeah, it definitely did. Instead of a never-ending party on a private K owned by Pablo Escobar, as they promised, you find yourself sitting in a FEMA tent with a sandwich that is only 2 slices of bread and bad processed cheese on it. You don't even get mayo or mustard. There is no music, as every festival guest other than the local band is pulled out. You sit in your FEMA tent and was basically a parking lot of a sandals resort, wondering where it all went wrong.
How was that local band, though?
I mean, I heard that they were pretty good, and that afterwards they actually got some DJs up there to just kind of pump music out.
Okay.
So, there was at least some music, but it wasn't Blink-182 and Nickelback and all these other
yeah.
bands.
Okay.
Not that I would have wanted to see either of those bands at the moment, but that's beyond the point.
Both of us are way too, we're hipster in different directions for this particular type of thing, I think.
This all began with a man named Billy McFarland. In his own head, McFarland was a visionary. His entrepreneurial skills were going to change entertainment. He started out with a very exclusive $250 per year card and app called Magnesis, which he said was a Latin word that meant absolutely nothing, but it sounded awesome. It was supposed to help you score hard to get concert tickets, restaurant reservations, and access to private events at shared meetups all over the country. There were times where this actually worked, like having Rick Ross perform at some of their parties. Rosario Dawson actually hosted some NBA players, and they did this out of a townhome in New York. So they did have some interesting things, but it never lived up to what they promised. According to most of the people that worked for McFarland, he was a little more concerned with hanging out with celebrities and being a celebrity than actually running his business, so he didn't get all of the exclusive deals that he really wanted to. In his quest to make the card a success, this put McFarland in contact with a lot of celebrities, publicists, and investors. He became friends with people like rapper Ja Rule, who would later help him promote the Fyre Festival. While stopping to fuel their private jet in the Bahamas, McFarland and Ja Rule talked about how great the location would be for a music festival. They petitioned the local government and were given the location called Roker Point on Great Exuma to have the festival.
Because everybody wants to go to a music festival in a place called Great Exuma.
I'm sure it's Exuma or something like that, but I get your meaning. This is actually one of the first spots where things started to get a little bit fraudulent. Despite knowing that the island had a population of near 8,000, they claimed that this event would be at Fyre Cay. It was supposed to be a remote island formerly owned by Pablo Escobar. And the Cay that they were talking about, I think, was called Nelson's Cay, and it was in the middle of nowhere. And it wasn't actually owned by Escobar, but one of his associates. There were a lot of fibbings happening right here with just even the location before they had anything.
They lied about the location it wasn't going to be at.
Yes.
Is what you're like. They told you were going to a place that you weren't going to go, and they made up stuff about the place that they knew you weren't going to go to anyway. It's not. it's like a layer of lie. It's a lie onion.
Yes. For the online promotion, McFarland hired some of the world's top models to run around in bikinis, diving to the ocean off of yachts, and showing them at elaborate concert stages that weren't on the island. It's a very good promotion, looking more like an expensive rap video or underwear ad. He also began to open ticket sales as soon as this promo dropped.
I could see how this would work. Yeah. Okay.
The social media campaign was actually very, very effective. He would pay Kendall Jenner and various other people with giant followings in the multiple millions to post about the Fyre Festival and start building some heat there. It cost him about $250,000 for a single Instagram post from Kendall Jenner, so he was willing to front some serious money for this.
Yowza. That's just a look into that whole business.
And what's crazy about this is that he actually had them post it without saying it was an ad, and that's
hardly policed.
Yeah, it's hardly policed, but it's still against federal law to have them say that.
Okay, fair enough.
That would go into some of the things that happened later.
I'm also on the do not call list, Tony, and let me tell you something. There's a lot of federal regulation that nobody cares about.
Yep. After these ads ran, McFarland finally started to try to put together the festival.
Oh, wait. That part of the planning.
Yes. A few experts claimed that it would run at least $50 million for what was advertised, and it would take at least another 6 months to a year to set up than the original timeline that he was given. Yarn Lavi, a veteran event planner, was hired, and he was working under the assumption that the event would be delayed until November instead of April. There was a problem, though. McFarland had gotten several loans and could not afford to suspend events. Some of them would require a $500,000 payment within 60 days of the loan, and to suspend that would be to default on many of these loans that he had piled up from investors. In his newly acquired luxury Manhattan office, McFarland started cutting expenses for the festival. Instead of luxury housing and bungalows, he bought tents with dirt floors. Instead of paying bands deposits for their time, he hoped they would just show up. He did not email the people who had purchased tickets for the event, imagining a different event or explaining that their accommodations would be much different, that their food would be much less valuable. He just kind of put the tickets out there. Most of the tickets sold for about $1,200, which if you think about it, that's actually pretty reasonable for a 2-week stay in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't sound like an unfeasible price, but there were a lot that were sold for $12,000 and a few listed at $250,000, although it's not confirmed that anybody bought the $250,000 ticket.
You would think that if someone did buy it, you could get him at least a nice hotel on the island.
Especially considering there were a lot of hotels on the island. Like, it's not the remote island that he had claimed it was. In order to raise some immediate capital, the Fyre Festival would run off of wristbands. This wasn't something that they wanted to do because they thought it would be cool and trendy and it would make it easy like Disneyland. This was something that they did immediately to raise money. It required that you deposit money into your account on the Fyre app before the festival. There would be no cash or cards taken on site. Event goers were asked to put $300 to $500 per day of their intended stay on the festival cards, and said that a minimum of $1,500 would be needed if you were going to enjoy yourself at the festival. More than 40% of the funds raised from this were immediately used to pay debts, not to set up the actual festival itself.
Yeah, I was going to say, this sounds... I don't know what the word for this is, except for maybe stealing?
I think that what the government said was fraud more than anything else.
Okay, telling someone, saying, I will send you a free mattress, or not I will send you a mattress for $500, send me the $500, and then you send them, like, a sleeping bag. I guess that's fraud.
Fraud, theft, whatever they can prove it is later. Some of these money troubles were almost abated when Comcast Ventures was going to offer $25 million to buy the Fyre app. And oddly enough, I really couldn't tell what the Fyre app was supposed to do. They said it was like a concert booking app, which sounded like it was more for like bands to be booked at private events and things like that. And you could also buy concert tickets. It was kind of an extension of Magnesis, but you couldn't really tell exactly what it was for. And
I McFarland like the idea that Comcast didn't know either.
Yeah.
Just like, we got $25 lying around. What's a trendy app we could buy? Facebook too expensive.
When McFarland valued the company at $90 million, Comcast was a little bit suspicious about this and asked for proof. When the proof that McFarland sent didn't quite pan out, Comcast kind of ran away.
Good on Comcast. Not the bumbling idiots I made them out to be 2 sentences earlier.
I mean, if you can attract interest for $25 million, you're obviously doing something right, but you can't just overvalue everything. Anyway. At the beginning of 2017, confidence was starting to wane among members of the Fyre event team. They decided they would postpone the event until 2018 to perfect it. According to New York Magazine, right before they pulled the plug, an executive stated, "Let's just do it and be legends, man."
What do they think legends are?
Oh, they just thought they'd have a legendary party and things would just work out. The event would go on as scheduled.
I mean, we are talking about them, but usually...
Infamy is more what they are than legends.
That's
or
correct.
infamous. On April 27th, people began to fly to Miami and took chartered flights to the island. Upon arrival, they were greeted to an impromptu beach party instead of taken to the resort, where some people felt that this was a stalling technique. Part of the reason for stalling was that a storm had come through the night before and soaked the insides of all the tents, leaving the mattresses waterlogged in the ground muddy.
Why did they have tents that didn't keep the rain out?
They just had the doors open on the tents.
Yowza. Guys, that's not how tents work.
When busloads of people were eventually brought to the concert site, all they saw were FEMA tents stretched across the beach and very little else. They had one stage. The staff members were nowhere to be found, and the few that were there had no idea how the tents were supposed to be reserved. Instead of bathrooms that were supposed to be very nice and luxurious, there were porta potties every 100 yards or so. The entire festival also only had 3 showers to be shared with more than 5,000 people. Instead of an idyllic beach, they were graded to a crater-covered mass of rocks thinly covered with sand that the fire company had brought in to try to make a better beach. The water looked inviting, but people were told not to go in because of a rampant shark problem.
Okay. Now it's turning into a sci-fi movie. Complete with low budget.
Like, I feel like this is the asylum of music festivals.
Yeah, except the asylum makes money.
Yeah, and the asylum is generally successful.
You don't go into the asylum movie expecting Oscar quality material.
There was a much bigger problem, though, than the tents or anything else. No one had any food. Event organizers started to hand out bottles of tequila to try to satiate the very nervous and bummed out crowd. After 5 hours with no music, food, or any other type of organization, plastic containers with bread and cheese showed up. And there were a lot of pictures of this where it's just a plastic container, some lettuce with some dressing on it, 2 pieces of bread, and a slice of American cheese. And that's they were promised that they would have catered meals the whole time, done by world-class chefs.
Can I say, I just want to back up and mention that in the litany of bad ideas that we've had so far, the idea of giving irritable and unhappy concert goers, quote unquote concert goers, liquor to help with their dehydration is just medically and socially and in every other way a bad idea.
Oh yeah, that also reminds me that the medical people left after 4 hours because they realized they weren't going to get paid. And they did try to make it a little bit better. The tequila was being poured out by Instagram models, basically they were walking up to people and just pouring tequila into people's mouths. So they were trying to make sure that people were in as good of spirits as they could be, but by about 9 p.m., those girls had left too. None of the guests had also received their bags yet either. They had basically checked their bags on the airplane and they didn't know when or where they were going to show up. Once darkness hit, some of these containers showed up and they basically just opened the doors and didn't do anything for distribution. They just dumped all these bags on the beach and it was a free-for-all, and tons of people had their bags stolen. There was no accountability there. There weren't enough security people to actually make sure that things were going on right. McFarland was basically running around this event on a 4-wheeler doing wheelies on the beach, not really doing anything to help people.
He was there, though.
He was there.
Surprising to me.
Yeah.
I would have been not there. I just especially riding around woo, are we having a good time? With the giant crowd of people that I've just screwed over who have been drinking tequila all day.
Yeah, that's a good way to get thrown into the shark-infested water.
Yes. Yes. That would have been a good idea.
That night, the government of the Bahamas banned any more planes from landing, effectively stranding the concert goers. Because this was peak season as well, all the other resorts were running at capacity, so people could not simply escape to another resort.
What caused them to ban the planes from landing?
I think they just didn't want to have more people getting stranded without food and water.
So they didn't want more people coming in. You could land a plane to take people away, right?
Yeah, you could take people away, but you couldn't actually bring more people in, especially not these chartered flights that they had gotten from Miami.
Okay, so specifically those flights, not just it wasn't there was a hurricane and they just said, all right, all air travel suspended.
But there is some shady stuff that happens here in a bit with the whole airport situation.
Okay.
The event was officially canceled, and not a single of the listed bands showed up. Not even Ja Rule, who helped organize it, showed up, as he was doing a concert in Chicago. The next day, people lined up at the airport only to have the doors chained shut after they had entered the airport. They were locked inside without food, water, air conditioning, or a means of escape. There's numerous videos of this on social media where they just literally chained the doors shut on these people while they were trying to figure it out. I couldn't find an answer to that. That was bizarre to me. That seems like some weird government stuff going on.
I guess.
Reddit would end up making a subreddit just for pictures and descriptions of the chaos. Google Reddit Fyre Festival if you want to see it. And you can see in real time, if you go to the top post, what was happening, what people were saying about it, and what it was really like on the ground there. There were people looting, setting fire, and drank themselves into a much worse situation. The storm of social media hate on the event led to the fire company sending out cease and desist letters to people making fun of their event. This was also kind of an odd time because it was shortly after Trump had been put into office and there was a lot of contention against rich people. It was a very strange...
I wanted to back up and say, because you had that cease and desist order, I was going to say, somebody needs to do an episode of a podcast about, things that are bad ideas, about telling people not to talk about things.
Yeah, it's almost like there should be a name for it, like something about when Barbara Streisand tried to stop her house from being online.
Yeah, we'll have to put that one on the list, Tony.
It was kind of an odd time. It was post-Trump being elected, and there was a lot of bitterness about rich people. So social media basically was just eating this up. They were like, oh, look at these dumb rich millennial kids having to go without for a couple days because they paid $12,000 and all this. And most of the attendees were just kids that had scraped a lot of money together to go on a vacation. Like... I'm sure there were a lot of those like trust fund kids like out there, but there were a lot of people who just saved up $1,200 for a Bahamas vacation. That's not that much for that type of vacation. That's a pretty good deal. So I think that got overblown a little bit in the social media firestorm that happened afterwards. Fyre offered refunds to their attendees while this was happening. They actually had people walking around with a clipboard and basically pieces of copy paper that you were supposed to sign if you wanted a refund. These wouldn't really be acknowledged until later, but on the website, if you wanted to afterwards, you had to apply for a refund, and they gave you the option. If you wanted to let it ride, as they said on the site, you could get VIP tickets for the 2018 Fyre Festival.
That one's coming up soon, right?
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Next couple weeks?
I mean, it is almost a year. Like since the event. They were also kind of shaming people with this because they were like, you had to click a button that said, no, I don't like adventure. Please give me a refund.
Is that like the old, my frame of reference for this is, I think, Doom. If you wanted to quit, they would say, embrace cowardice?
Pretty much like the island version of this. Shortly after the dust settled, McFarland was hit with 8 different major lawsuits. The first one was a class action lawsuit for over $100 million. The lawsuit alleges fraud, breach of contract. Part of this was the decision from organizers to go cashless, so no one had money for taxis. Breach of covenant of good faith, and many more, and negligent misrepresentation being the main one. More serious than these lawsuits for McFarland's personal freedom were several charges of wire fraud from the federal government. As of this month, March 2018, McFarland pleaded guilty to wire fraud. $26 million of his estate are being given to the federal government in forfeitures, as well as facing 40 years in prison. Most likely he will serve 8 to 10 of those according to his lawyers, but the sentencing is happening in April of 2018.
Yowza.
Yeah, so he's facing a lot for this. Like, he's definitely being held accountable. We'll see if he actually stays accountable and if they give him some prison time. But it sounded like, basically, with his misrepresentation and everything else that was going on, they kind of want to make an example out of him. I very much doubt he's going to get 40 years. This is mostly just outright blatant incompetence on his part. I don't know how much of this was him trying to scam people out of money, although he has been accused of that in the past from photographers and a lot of other people that he's refused to pay. So it's a situation where it's hard to tell how much malicious intent was here and how much was just incompetence, but it's a big enough screw-up that the federal government decided to fully charge him with it.
I'm 100% on board. Whether or not it's incompetence or maliciousness, it doesn't matter to me. This guy hurt people.
Yeah.
Put people in danger.
I'm honestly surprised that no one got killed in this. Like, you're talking about that much alcohol, that much dehydration, that little oversight, and, like, the possibility of a riot or something like that. I'm very surprised that no one got seriously hurt from this.
On the other hand, if you could say, I went to Fyre Festival 2017, that's we talk about being legends. If you were not one of the organizers and you just, like, got to go, that's pretty legendary at this point.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the whole time I was researching it. It was like, if I could have gone and just experience this, I feel like that would be an amazing story, and it's something that I wish I kind of would have been able to say.
Well, it's in hindsight, it seems like that. Going into it expecting the best things ever and getting what they got, it would be pretty rotten. But
especially if you did the $12,000 tickets.
Yowza. I'm glad this guy's getting some kind of recompense. Like, at least they're taking his money away.
Yeah, and maybe on a future episode we'll end up doing an update about like what his actual sentencing is, because I'm sure people are going to want to know about that.
I hope it's... I would love to see this guy serve the full sentence. Although people have gotten a lot less for a lot worse, but this is not cool.
Yeah, it definitely is not.
This reminds me of a quote I heard recently. You talked about what this guy wanted out of life early on in the podcast. And I remember hearing this quote about people, especially younger, like 14, 15, 16-year-olds, being asked what they want to be when they grow up. And the most common answer today is famous. It's not a job. Nobody wants to actually do anything. They just want to be Kendall Jenner.
It's fascinating and kind of sad at the same time. Yeah.
It's super sad, yes. That's what happened to this guy.
I think that's all we had to say on the Fyre Festival. We'd love to hear your comments on this video. If you're watching on YouTube, just drop them below. If you're listening to it on the podcast, go to humanechoes.com and click the link for this episode. We'd love to hear from you. Or hit us up on social media at tsouthcott, at Albert_Berg, or at Human Echoes. If you enjoyed this, please consider supporting us for $2 a month, $5 a month, or more at patreon.com/Human Echoes.
And if you have ideas that you'd like us to cover, bad ones, you can send them to badideashow@gmail.com.
All right, everybody, have a good week.
Bye.